Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Boruto video. So this is going to be my speculation ahead of the release of Boruto TBV Vortex Chapter 2, which is coming September 20th. So we're 9 days away from the release of this chapter. And like I did for the latter half of the first part of Boruto, I'll be doing these kind of discussion videos like right in between the release of like the previous chapter and then leading into the next chapter. So this will be like combination kind of like extra discussion on the chapter we already had and as much speculation as is possible for the next chapter, because I think the interesting thing about this one, getting into it straight away, is that chapter 1 was very introductory. There's a major cliffhanger at the end of like, will the fight, like the big fight we've been waiting for, a three-way battle, happen like immediately. But otherwise the chapter was very introductory. It was very recappy on some regards. There are little bits and pieces like scattered throughout the chapter that are quite interesting to discuss, but I definitely come out of the first chapter kind of feeling like I don't just want more, but like I feel like I need more. Like I almost can't really discuss too much about what I think will happen until we actually see a little bit more. Speaking, I think, to, you know, I'm not going to say pacing problem immediately, because I think you have to do these initial chapters. It is a relaunch to a certain extent. You have to do those type of chapters in certain specific ways. So I'm not going to full on level pacing problems at it like immediately. But if we jump into chapter 2 and it's still like exhibiting the same problems that Boruto initially had, like it's obviously that frustrating thing of like, there just have to be an acceptance that this specific creative team just does struggle with pacing. But I'd like to see some sort of evolution in Boruto TBV Vortex in terms of them delivering a little bit more each chapter than we were typically, we had to accept in the first half of the series. So my general thoughts were that like it was a really good chapter, but it probably was not as incredible as maybe the hype maybe made it out to be. I think it's successful because, of course, you've seen the popularity of the relaunch of Boruto post time skip, in that because they did a relaunch, you've kind of been able to see the kind of numbers basically go up from 0 to being right up there in the Shonen Jump kind of stuff, just with the views on the official chapter and stuff like that. And that's been a major success, highlighting that there's a lot of hype behind Boruto, and even if there were kind of frustrations about certain aspects of the original, it's at a good point, and this is actually a really good relaunch point, so that's a clear success. This waiting a little bit, leading into TBV Vortex has worked out. So, let's get into some talking points here. So, I think the main talking point probably just has to be where we end off. Boruto makes his big kind of, return right at the end here, literally arriving out of nowhere on Code's face, and he doesn't get a chance to say anything just yet. It's just the surprise from everyone that he has literally turned up out of nowhere. He's not with Sasuke, so that's immediately a question. Based on stuff that Code said to Sarada just prior to this, there was, of course, an incident that happened, I guess, a year into the time skip, aka 2 years ago, where it seems like Code and Boruto, I guess, / Sasuke, came into contact with each other, and this is why Code seems to have a scar on his face now, and this is, I guess, why Code has stayed further away from the village, because he's been very, very eager to track down Boruto very specifically, because, of course, he views Boruto as basically being Kawaki, and Kawaki is the one that he has the true core issue with, ultimately. Now, the big question is now going to be, do we get the big fight here? Are we starting it here in chapter 2, and we're just going to deal with this? Like, we are right into the action. There's no chapters upon chapters of build up to when will Boruto come back to the village, then when will Code attack, and we're getting all these complicated things. No, the 3 key players are right here in the village. We can have the 3-way battle between Code, Kawaki, and Boruto right now. But there are complexities because, of course, yes, there is a core issue between Boruto and Kawaki that needs to be dealt with, but there's also the we need to protect the village from code aspect to this as well. So there's a few different ways where like the pairings of the even within the three kind of might actually happen. And it does get into a lot about where is Code as a character. My general thoughts on what I've seen online about Code have been that I don't think that many people super hype him up as the greatest villain of all time. I don't get the impression that there is a ton of like really strong interest in like this is a fantastic villain. There's a little bit of okay, he's got some cool plot elements to going on because he's continuing like the Otsutsuki legacy, and the whole idea that like he has the 10 tails and he wants to actually, you know, create a chakra fruit. That's an interesting concept because that is what the Otsutsukis want, and the idea is that even if Code ultimately fails, which we assume he will based on the chapter 1 flash forward scene, the setup being there ready to go opens the door for other Otsutsukis to arrive into the series, which is what I think the overall future of the series actually is, because I don't know how long you can stretch, given where we are right now, how long you can stretch getting towards Boruto Kawaki and having their big conflict and eventually, I guess, turnaround for Kawaki. Because I do feel you probably have to have a decent, substantial part of the series take place with Boruto and Kawaki on the same side as each other, going against the Otsutsuki, if that's indeed the full trajectory of the series. Like, I kind of really, at this point, don't really picture that flash forward scene as being like the quote-unquote final battle of the series. I kind of almost see it as being the maybe midway or 2/3 of the way through the series battle, and you have to give time for the core plot to actually come out overall. Because again, Kawaki's goal is to destroy all Otsutsuki, and it's not just Boruto. We know there's a whole clan out there who are probably furious that this planet is causing so many problems, and they're probably on the verge of sending in some of the high-ups, maybe even some of the leaders of the clan, because I think we need to get into like Otsutsuki backstory stuff eventually, because that's why we introduced the whole idea of Shinjutsu and address the idea of Shibai, the god Otsutsuki, and that being kind of the origin of a lot of these crazy abilities. And we need to get back to that, I think, because there's a lot of mystery surrounding it still. And otherwise, it doesn't feel like a lot of these characters necessarily touch on that stuff, because it's more of a personal issue between all of these characters. So straight away, it puts Code in a position where it feels like everything points to the fact that he can't win, ultimately. He might destroy the village, quote-unquote, setting up the scenario for Boruto and Kawaki to have their fight in a ruined village. But it seems like he loses that, because his goal is to grow a chakra fruit, and he can't do that unless he sacrifices Boruto or Kawaki to the Ten Tails. And we know those two have a confrontation, so either some crazy stuff happens and Code remains alive and the fight doesn't happen here, and so these two are able to have their big fight but Code is still there in the background, or he's losing here and we're finishing up with the character, which, at least to me, I kind of feel like I think that's probably the way to go. Just accept that like he's a reasonably well set up character here, but he's a character who probably should lose and just set up the stage for more Otsutsukis to arrive. Because like otherwise, like his issue at a core level, like he wants revenge against a lot of our main cast members because of the death of Ishiki. Primarily, he has an issue with Kawaki. Now, let's reverse the swap here. Kawaki is the one he has an issue with because Kawaki was basically chosen ahead of him. He is the destined chosen vessel. So you understand the rivalry between those two just over, you know, who the favorite effectively for Ishiki actually was. You have the person who ended up being the kind of last-ditch person to kind of give the Otsutsuki legacy to, versus the person who basically threw it all away and effectively killed the Otsutsuki. that's a kind of notable dynamic. So you're hoping some of that stuff comes up throughout this as we address it. But with the swap still in place, Code is directing that stuff at Boruto, which is kind of interesting. Again, I still think they can do the reveal in a way where like Code is just going after Boruto and he actually wasn't affected by the swap, but I think he has been based on what we know. So that complicates things as well, that you're not actually having the character truly direct their issues at the right person. But because Boruto and Kawaki are both immune from the swap, them seeing Code aim his like hatred at the wrong person still hits them. So it's a very complicated situation here. So I think the fact that he started a full-on invasion, it means we're not stopping this now. I don't think there's really any way to get to a situation where we temporarily fend off Code and we're preparing for a secondary attack. I think it's here straight away. And it's just all about, like, does Code actually have some sort of a plan to really surprise us and actually step out as a properly super interesting, threatening villain, or is he just going to be presented in exactly the way that he has been so far? And that's where the whole demon situation comes into play, where they tripled down on the idea that Demon is the most powerful character in the series. He is more than a match for Code, even with the limiters removed, of course, because that's one of the big things, is that like Code got his limiters removed, but still was basically powerless against Demon because of his abilities. So has he planned for that? And how do those characters play into all of this? Because of course Ada's a big factor in the series, but Ada kind of wants Boruto to knock some sense into Kawaki, because the current Kawaki is not the person she basically loves. So she wants to see the kind of brothers fight and kind of Boruto to change Kawaki back and change his mind. And it just means that Code is ultimately this character getting in the way of all of that, where right now he can't really succeed at his goal because we know both these characters have to survive. So the chakra fruit can't grow. But the 10 tails is clearly there for a reason. And like I said, I do think that is for the future of like introducing other Otsutsuki characters going forward. So what are we actually going to do in the next chapter? Like, we're here. It's clear that like Sarada and Boruto need to talk. Like, it's going to be really interesting to see like what Boruto actually like says to someone who's actually important to him first. Because, you know, we don't know what's happened. Like, are we going to address the history between Boruto and Code? Like, what incident actually happened? Has something happened to Sasuke? Is that why he's not here? Like, what's the situation there? Because they could do that. Like, they could jump in, set very little of Chapter 2 in the present day, and actually have it be a flashback to, like, 2 years ago. That's one way to kind of get a little bit of time before you jump back into your fight properly. But I don't know. I'm not sure about that. I have a feeling that this is probably just going to be one of those things that maybe, rather than being a full-on flashback, it probably is just the idea of, yeah, it's exactly as you think. They encountered each other. There was a fight. And 1 year into his training, Boruto was able to leave a scar on Code. They were able to get away and remain on the run the entire time. And that's basically what brings us up to today. Is it as simple as that? Is there more to it? That's where it really comes into play. Like, has Boruto just done his, you know, protagonist thing and jumped into the village before Sasuke, and Sasuke is actually right behind, or has something actually happened to him? That's a big deal. Because if they just quote unquote off screen in the time skip killed off Sasuke, that's a huge thing to do. I know everyone has had the death flags up for Sasuke, but I think given that he survived into the time skip and that's a whole like thing, I think he feels a little bit safe until he actually like reemerges in a way in the series. So I'd be very surprised if they just were like, yeah, Code killed him in the past, and this is why Boruto seems a little bit more serious kind of now. It might create a little bit of this is why Boruto might really actually want to take out Code, but he still delivered a bit of a one-liner when he arrived on the scene, and you think like if Code had killed his master, he'd be talking about that straight away. So I think Sasuke's probably just in hiding a little bit because he's quote unquote like betrayed the village again for the second time. We know that the swap has affected Sasuke, but he has like chosen to purposefully like doubt what's happening here, and maybe there's a bit of a thing where like that could actually be kind of an interesting thing of like what's the mental impact on the whole idea of Sasuke forcing himself to go against what he views as being his reality, given that we seem to know that the omnipotence kind of fights against people who doubt it, and this is why it's almost impossible to break out of it. So after years upon years of him kind of forcing himself to, no, I view Boruto as an ally, and I will train him and not consider him a villain, while the spell effectively is still constantly trying to lead him down the other path, that might have a mental impact on Sasuke, and maybe that's kind of part of why he's maybe not involved here. Because I think the other cool element of this first chapter was definitely the little hints of like Mitsuki beginning to have some doubts that he of course views Kawaki as being Boruto, so Kawaki is his son to his moon, and the way Kawaki treats Mitsuki doesn't match up with Mitsuki's memories of this relationship. And now that Boruto's in the village, we assume Mitsuki will witness what's happening here, and he's going to start to feel that Boruto, who he views as being Kawaki, is actually the one who fits this dynamic that he has going on. And how's that going to work? Might Mitsuki be someone on the verge of also breaking free or changing kind of the reality of the situation? There's also Himawari, who just normally, naturally, as a character, the swap, the way it's affected her, it just sort of only slightly changes things, because it seems like even without the swap, she would still be willing to give Kawaki a chance, and so she is willing to give Boruto a chance here, because they're both her brothers in her mind, and she has witnessed them both do important things that mean something to her. And so there's that. But then there's also the kind of more interesting thing where she really has this strong feeling that Naruto is actually alive out there, even though everyone seems to know that Naruto was killed. So that's interesting. Is that just the classic anime thing of like, I just have a feeling, despite everything else, that this is true? Or is there actually some sort of a thing where she actually, through some sort of a power, truly has a sense that reality is not as it seems? Because we know there's some sort of a unique thing at the core of Himawari, and that's why Demon showed an interest in her. It's either that or Demon actually has a crush on Himawari. We don't know what direction they're going in, because we don't know Demon well enough as a character to know where his emotions lie and that sort of thing. Because like he could very easily be like, wait, why am I questioning attacking her? What do I sense? And it's might be some sort of sense of romance, but otherwise the suggestion is that there is some sort of unique power to Himawari, which makes sense. If Boruto has this unique power, if he's an important character, then of course it would make sense his sister is unique in some way as well. And I like that setup for the character, and I really hope they do something interesting with her, because I think that's the whole idea here, is Boruto is going to be strong enough to do quite a lot on his own, but he's going to need some help, and I think that's why Himawari is being set up in the way that she is. And I think the other important part of the chapter, Sarada seems to be given quite a lot more focus than she was in the first half of the series. And I hope they continue with this, and it's not just a thing of like, because of the scenario here, it makes sense to focus on her initially, but ultimately she will still just fade into the background, kind of like she did in the past. Because Boruto Part 1 was the Boruto and Kawaki show. Sarada had moments here and there, but it didn't feel like she was like your third main character necessarily. She occasionally got focus, but not a lot of the time. Now, they seem to have really made this commitment to kind of her being rebellious in front of Shikamaru, really going down the path of Naruto, accepting that, you know, she'll go against the village, even if it means she won't be promoted any further to like being a squad captain or a Jonin. She's fine being a Genin, because who she really is following is Naruto, who went from Genin to Hokage. And I really like that, and I hope that that suggests they have a strong plan for her, because, you know, you have her as being positioned as like someone really just trying to defend Boruto, but then she and Sumire are also some of the only people able to be like immune to Ada's abilities, like basically being immune to both the charming and the omnipotence is fascinating, and it's going to be interesting to see where exactly that goes. So she has an importance on that side of things as well. But then also from her powers, we know that she has the Mangekyo Sharingan now, but has she trained? And how could she train? Kakashi seems like the only character who left in the village who can train her, unless we reintroduce like Shin Uchiha in some way and do stuff. But there's a pathway for her to train at this, but like, where is she in that training? And then how does the whole Mangekyo Sharingan blindness thing work? Because if she uses it too much, that's coming into play, and there's a lot of, you know, confusing elements there depending on what way they go with it. But I really hope the fact that she is there in the scene in like the final 2 pages suggests that like she is not just going to be kind of left out of this whole situation. So hopefully they treat her well, give her a real chance to shine here. They need to make that work, and not make it just be the focus is only ever on 1 or 2 characters. Because like the focus is at the end is like Code Kawaki Boruto. I hope Sarada has a place in the high up main character tiers here as well. But let's not forget that there are also other elements going on in the background that we still need to get to as well. Like, Amado has not been seen in quite a while. We haven't seen him post time skip. We don't know if the swap has affected him. And because of his still rather mysterious like involvement in basically the ability that made this swap happen, omnipotence, he gave that to her. And they've been very vague about the whole idea of like, this is a guy who can give godlike powers to people, and the way that that exactly happened. You know, then there's the whole personal plot for Amado with his daughter Akebi, and Kawaki's powers being the ones who can bring her back. So if the swap has worked on Amado, he thinks Boruto has those powers. If it hasn't, he knows Kawaki actually is the one who has those powers. That's an interesting one, but we need to come back around to that, of course. And that maybe is where, you know, we're wondering like Sumire, like, She like Sarada is immune from Ada's abilities, but then she has that kind of Amado connection as well. So is that where her focus as a character is going to be? Because, you know, is she just going to be a side character going forward, or are we really playing into kind of what's going on here? Because we're still wondering, why did the swap, why does Ada's charm abilities, like in a way, why do they not work on these 2 characters? And it's beginning to go down the path, because it's not necessarily a bloodline thing because Sasuke was affected. It's almost getting into the idea, is it about your feelings towards people that maybe these abilities are based around? The idea, in a way, with both of these characters is that they both like Boruto a lot. So is that the direction here? I'm not entirely sure on that. But there are a lot of cool elements at play here, because again, it's not just a 3-way fight coming up as well. There's still the clog rhymes across the entire village, and this gives the opportunity for the likes of, I guess, Sakura and other notable shinobi in the village to get their chance to fight against the kind of armies and stuff like that. Similarly, like we did meet Inoshika Cho. We saw them training Himawari. Like there's a chance for these characters to also get a chance to step up and get involved in the action as we go forward here. And you kind of wonder, you know, how much focus is everyone going to get here? How big, how bombastic is the upcoming action actually going to be? But it's just all about what do they actually do next. And at least for me, I feel like the intent here is that we are starting off in a big way. It's just, I almost in a way struggle with the idea of like, are they just going to commit to Code gets defeated in the early chapters here, and we then get to focus in on the stuff that we're super interested in, which is getting to Kawaki versus Boruto, and then the future of the series beyond that. Because I really want to stress that I really feel they are not trying to do an exact repeat of Naruto, where the final fight effectively is Naruto versus Sasuke. I don't think they're trying to position it, at least right now, that the final fight of the series is going to be Boruto versus Kawaki, because I do feel they have to have a use for both of these characters now reunited, fighting together against the true threat, which is and has been the Otsutsuki continuously trying to invade the planet. And so stopping that permanently feels like the overall way to actually end the series and bring somewhat of a lasting peace overall, in terms of the grand threats of the world. And like I said, there's been more Otsutsuki lore in Boruto. There needs to be even more in my mind. So I think we're in a good spot. It's just, I hope as the chapters go on, it doesn't fall into the same issues that the first stage of the manga had, where there were a lot of chapters where I just think the page count wasn't used as effectively as it could be, and it rarely felt like you got, wow, a month, 40 pages of content. It felt like you were lucky if you came out with about 20 pages of notable content from the 40 that we actually got. So I hope the planning time that they've had allows for, a real sense that they really have the series planned out a little bit better. That's what I want to see here, is that break was worth something to the series, and it leads to a notable jump in quality. If that is the case, we'll see. But there's a lot of exciting stuff on the horizon in the series. It's just, in terms of, I think, pure speculation, it is very early to, I think, try and make any real decisions. Like, once we get into the fight and I think have a sense for like where we stand, we'll get more and more of a sense for, okay, I think I know where it's going. It's still very, very early here, where we still have so many questions about what happened during the time skip. What are the exact details that have led up to these three characters facing each other in the village? Why is Code chosen this time to strike? That sort of thing. So yeah, that's where I'm going to wrap up the discussion. Of course, I will attempt to get my review for Chapter 2 out the day the chapter officially comes out. But in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are. What are your speculations for Chapter 2? What do you think will happen? Especially with that three-way fight. Do you think we're just getting straight into it? And I suppose most importantly, how big or not of a threat do you think Code is? Is Code just here for the first arc of Two Blue Vortex? And he's kind of disposable in the grand scheme of things? Or are they actually going to do something much bigger with the character? Because I think there's a lot of confusion over if we're meant to view him as being as important as we think. But let me know in the comments. But yes, that has been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.